Welcome back to the Paranormal State, Washington, and UFO UAP. With Makāula Nakae, a lifelong experiencer and ET contactee since 1990. Today's episode, 1947 second, Roswell, San Agustin. The legend of the second crash site, San Agustin, and the search for the rest of the story. When mainstream ufologists and independent researchers like Stanton Friedman, Kevin Randle, and Donald Schmitt dove deep into the Roswell archives, they quickly realized a glaring geographical and logistical problem. The scattered tinfoil and balsa wood on Mac Brazel's Foster Ranch Project Mogul looked like a mess, but it didn't look like an entire intact vehicle. If a craft actually crashed, where was the main body? This logical gap birthed the core of the crash-retrieval hypothesis. The belief that Roswell was a two-part event involving an initial structural breakup at the Foster Ranch and a second primary crash site roughly 150 miles to the west. If the scattered tinfoil and balsa wood on Mac Brazel's Foster Ranch was just the opener, the legendary second act of the Roswell saga takes place 150 miles to the west on the high, desolate stretch of New Mexico known as the Plains of San Agustin near Magdalena and Socorro. While the Foster Ranch debris field gave us the administrative headache of a top-secret spy balloon, the San Agustin site is where ufology officially left meteorology behind and entered the realm of absolute science fiction. This is ground zero for the most explosive, conversation-halting element of modern lore, the recovery of non-human biological entities. To set the stage, we have to rewind the clock to that chaotic, sweltering window in early July 1947, specifically the frantic 7 days between late June and July 9, 1947. When the entire fabric of American military public relations managed to unravel itself. Late June, early July 1947. Amidst a torrential desert thunderstorm, ranch foreman Mac Brazel hears an almighty explosion and stumbles across a shimmering, indestructible debris field on the Foster Ranch. July 7, 1947. Brazel drags a sample of the weird, uncreasable foil and unbreakable sticks into town, showing it to Chavez County Sheriff George Wilcox, who promptly calls the Roswell Army Airfield. Major Jesse Marcel is dispatched to investigate. July 8, 1947. The base public information officer, Walter Oates, hits send on the most famous press release in human history, casually announcing to a stunned globe that the 509th Bombardment Group has successfully captured a flying disc. July 9, 1947. General Roger Ramey hits the panic button in Fort Worth, Texas, swaps out the debris for a shredded weather balloon, and forces Major Marcel to pose for humiliating photographs next to a pile of kite sticks, declaring the whole thing a meteorological misunderstanding. While General Ramey was busy playing arts and crafts with weather balloons in Texas, researchers argue that a completely separate, far more terrifying drama was unfolding simultaneously out on the plains of San Agustin. According to decades of witness testimonies gathered by investigators, this is where the main intact disc-shaped vehicle allegedly made its final terminal stop. Unlike the quiet pasture of the Foster Ranch, witnesses claimed the secondary site featured a grounded metallic saucer surrounded by the ultimate cosmic souvenir. Small 4-foot-tall humanoid bodies with large heads and gray skin scattered in the desert dirt. Naturally, before anyone could check if the alien passengers needed a tow truck, an armed military cordon supposedly swept in, shoved everyone back at gunpoint, and locked the grid down tighter than a top-secret vault. Skeptics love to point out that these dramatic accounts didn't surface until decades later, suggesting a classic case of cultural telephone, where a misunderstood spy balloon collided with 1950s sci-fi monster movies. But for the true believers, San Agustin is the missing puzzle piece. It explains why a simple weather balloon mix-up required a decades-long military cover-up. Whether it happened exactly as the legends say, or simply exists as the ultimate campfire myth, the plains of San Agustin remain the exact coordinates where human history officially stopped being a solo flight. When researchers like Stanton Friedman, Kevin Randle, and Donald Schmitt began digging into the mud of the San Agustin secondary crash narrative, they needed more than vague rumors, they needed boots-on-the-ground witnesses. The anchor for the entire San Agustin legend rests on a surprisingly academic, mundane group of people, who happened to be in the wrong place at the absolute most historic time possible, a university field expedition. The primary eyewitness testimony behind the San Agustin crash comes from a man frequently referred to in ufology literature by the pseudonym Barney Barnett, or simply Barnett. He was not a conspiracy theorist, a sci-fi author, or an attention-seeking crackpot. He was a civil engineer and a civil service employee working for the U.S. government, specifically the Soil Conservation Service. In early July 1947, Barnett was out in the remote expanses of the Plains of San Agustin leading or participating in a field archaeology and geology expedition alongside a group of university professors and students from the University of New Mexico. They were mapping out the desert landscape, completely unaware that their routine scientific outing was about to violently intersect with the unknown. According to accounts later compiled from Barnett and members of the student group, their expedition stumbled across a bizarre anomaly disrupting the flat, desolate topography. They found a large, damaged, metallic, disc-shaped craft embedded in the brush and sand. It was unlike any terrestrial aircraft known at the time, seamless, dull metallic, showing clear signs of structural impact or catastrophic failure. The crew. What sent the encounter straight into the history books, however, was what lay outside the vehicle. Scattered around the impact zone and near the hull were several small humanoid bodies. Eyewitnesses described them as roughly 4 feet tall, with disproportionately large heads, slender torsos, and grayish skin. Some appeared to have perished in the crash, while others were reportedly dazed, staggering, or sitting incapacitated near the wreckage. For a brief, surreal window of time, a group of civilian scientists and students stood staring at an interstellar vehicle and its non-human occupants, bridging the gap between human history and cosmic reality in absolute silence. If you ever want to ruin a perfectly peaceful university field trip, forget bad weather or a flat tire. Just accidentally stumble across a crashed interstellar vehicle and its extraterrestrial pilot. For the unsuspecting professor, students, and government engineer Barnett out on the desolate plains of San Agustin, that serene window of scientific discovery lasted precisely as long as it took for the United States military to realize some civilians were crashing their cosmic crime scene. You have to hand it to the mid-century U.S. military. When they wanted a job done quietly, they didn't send a committee. They sent trucks, jeeps, and a whole lot of aggressive energy. Before the academic expedition could even pull out a tape measure, snap a photograph, or wonder aloud if they should update their academic journals, the desert silence was shattered. A heavily armed military contingent swept onto the site with the terrifying clockwork efficiency of a group of guys who clearly had places to be, and a top-secret timeline to protect. There was no polite knocking, no waving from a distance, and certainly no requests for autographs. Just a sudden, loud reminder that national security waits for no syllabus. The troops skipped pleasantries entirely, preferring a direct, no-nonsense communication style. According to witness testimonies, the university group was rounded up with the gentle charm of cattle herders, marched away from the wreckage at gunpoint, and treated to a comprehensive lecture on the legal definitions of treason. The message delivered to the terrified academics was crisp and unforgettable: see that shiny disc over there? You didn't see it. See those 4-foot-tall gray entities? They're an optical illusion. If you tell your spouse, your dog, or your local sheriff about this little desert gathering, the United States government is going to treat you like Benedict Arnold. It turns out nothing cures a sudden curiosity about astrophysics quite like an automatic rifle pointed at your belt buckle. Completely overwhelmed, thoroughly shaken, and outranked by several tons of armed personnel transport, the professor, the students, and poor Mr. Barnett were unceremoniously escorted off the plains. One moment they were expanding humanity's understanding of archaeology. The next, they were speeding back toward civilization, frantically trying to figure out how to see a spaceship. Skeptics, naturally, have spent decades poking holes in the Barnett account, arguing that it's a classic product of dusty memories, campfire storytelling, and too many 1950s B-movies warping historical reality. Yet, for researchers, the detail that a government-employed civil engineer was mixed up with actual university students added an uncomfortable layer of grit to the legend. Whether that fateful desert morning involved pulling a genuine alien craft out of the dirt or simply stumbling into the terrifyingly aggressive cleanup of a top-secret human screw-up, The story of the military sweep remains the ultimate turning point of the Roswell mythos. It was the exact second the story stopped being a funny little mix-up about tinfoil and weather balloons and transformed into the enduring, high-stakes realization that humanity might just have company. If you ever find yourself backed into a corner by decades of relentless UFO lore, hostile witnesses, and stubborn rumors about dead extraterrestrials in the desert, what is your bureaucratic game plan? If you're the United States Air Force in the 1990s, your answer is brilliant. Blame the crash test dummies. When the Air Force finally decided to address the persistent, messy rumors of a second crash site on the Plains of San Agustin in their official 1990s follow-up report, the Roswell Report. Case closed, they didn't lean into the paranormal. Instead, they offered an explanation so strangely hilarious that it somehow managed to be even weirder than the alien theory. To explain why multiple generations of witnesses swore they saw 4-foot-tall, gray-skinned humanoids scattered across the New Mexico sand, the Air Force pointed a finger at a classified 1950s initiative known as Project High Dive. During this glorious era of aerospace engineering, the military routinely loaded up high-altitude balloons and dropped anthropomorphic test dummies, life-size mannequins packed with scientific instruments, aluminum bones, and rubber skin straight down into the desert. They were testing ejection seats and parachute survival systems for high-altitude pilots. Apparently, nothing says advancing human aviation quite like throwing heavily instrumented rubber people out of the stratosphere and watching where they land. The Air Force's official stance on why everyone got so confused was a masterclass in psychological gymnastics. They argued that civilian and military witnesses had simply suffered from temporal compression, a fancy way of saying people are terrible at chronologies. According to this logic, terrified academics and rural engineers in July 1947 had somehow peered into a crystal ball, watched a secret 1950s parachute test involving rubber crash test dummies, and mentally pasted those events right on top of their 1947 weather balloon debris. In short, you didn't see an alien invasion, you just saw a dummy falling from the sky 8 years early. Skeptics naturally ate it up. To the rational mind, the dummy explanation is a classic case of folklore evolution, taking a messy mix of classified Cold War parachute drops, balloon spy tests, and sci-fi monster movies, and baking them into a delicious, multi-site conspiracy pie. Yet, for the true believers, the Air Force's frantic pivot to crash test dummies felt less like a scientific conclusion and more like a panic-induced punchline. Think about it. The military spent 50 years insisting it was a weather balloon, only to eventually pivot to actually those small, gray bodies you saw being loaded into trucks were just scientifically modified rubber mannequins falling out of the sky. If that is their idea of a comforting clarification, it's no wonder nobody bought it. Whether the Plains of San Agustin hold the remains of an interstellar traveler or are merely the final resting place of a heavily abused 1950s test dummy, one thing remains certain. That stretch of New Mexico sand will forever represent the line in the dust where human history stopped being a boring administrative inventory of lost spy gear and became our favorite, most enduring cosmic myth. To be continued. Watch and listen. Watch the cinematic video trailer. Listen to the full podcast now. Explore the archived Cosmic Awakening Volume 1, 1991, Peru, Journey into the Unknown. Sacred Valley of the Incas. Volume 2, Ascension 2012, The Golden Alchemy. Part 3, The First Contact and the Paranormal State. Join the journey. New episodes drop periodically. Each chapter delivers a tight, hyper-focused 10 to 30-minute exploration into the evolution of ufology, perfect for your daily plunge into decoding hidden messages from outer space, designed to raise awareness and foster human evolution. Subscribe to support your inner development. Thumbs up to help push our channel through the algorithm. Comment below. Share your thoughts on today's episode.